Good evening. I'm Pittsburgh City Councilman Daniel Lavelle,
And I'm Councilman Reverend Ricky Burgess.
and we welcome you to Black Pittsburgh Matters. Black Pittsburgh Matters is a series of virtual town hall meetings affirming a citywide agenda that Black Pittsburgh does indeed matter. Black Pittsburgh Matters means that Black lives matter. We must protect the health and safety of Black people. It means that Black communities matter. We must focus on rebuilding Black communities. And it means that Black wealth matters. We must focus on increasing Black employment and entrepreneurship.
The Black community has been disproportionately affected by a concurrent crisis. One, the COVID-19 pandemic and its economic crisis, and racial relations, which are both public health crises. Normally, in times of crisis and great change, we'd be coming to you at the Black elected officials of Pittsburgh, having meetings across the city with our constituents, partners, and allies. Since we cannot do so safely in the current pandemic, we're now using this media and platform to come to you in the ways which we can, to talk about what we're doing, to discuss policy and legislation concerning Black Pittsburgh. These meetings will be available via Facebook, YouTube, and the city's cable channel. You can contact or ask questions via the Black Pittsburgh Matters Facebook page, or email us at blackpghmatters, that's blackpghmatters@gmail.com. And you can also communicate to us through our live feed right now. Today's town hall meeting topic is trauma, mental health, and healing in Black Pittsburgh.
This past year has been really difficult for everyone, but particularly the Black community. Confronted with often racial injustices and a public health crisis disproportionately affecting African Americans, the Black community has survived a lot of trauma and challenges in a very short period of time. Black suicides have doubled in the past year. The school-age kids' mental health has been especially affected. It is important to take the temperature in the community and have conversations which promotes healthy, trauma-informed approaches to healing and advancing Black Pittsburgh.
And Daniel, I don't know what your experience has been. I've lost a number of my members, some from COVID directly, some just from the impact of being in isolation. I lost a member a few weeks ago who was 100 and I think 102, 103. I lost a member that was 95. I have a friend who lost her brother and her brother-in-law on successive days, both to COVID. And so I just know, for me, not being able to see my children, and not being able to get out and not being able to go to church or even visit my members who are in the hospital or nursing homes. And I just know there's a lot of built-in stress and frustration, and just myself just being locked up. There's a psychological damage all that takes.
Thankfully, prayerfully, I haven't lost as many people to COVID. I've known a number of people who have fallen ill to it, and unfortunately, I do know some who have passed away from it. But part of what I see, especially through my children, to be quite frank, is the fact that they miss being around others. They miss social interaction. They miss being able to be in school. They miss other children. And they will often, at times, struggle with that a little bit, with wanting to have more social interaction, which I think is why we've seen the number of mental health cases going up in our hospitals with school-age children, because they don't know how to struggle. And unfortunately, I've heard stories of my children when they talk to others who don't necessarily have parents in the house, which makes it extremely hard for them when they don't necessarily, like my children do. Both me and my wife are working from home, so at least they have that level of support. So many others don't. And then even worse, and not necessarily worse, but equally as devastating, is the stress and strain that is felt on parents. Parents who are struggling to figure out how to deal with daycare, parents who are struggling to figure out whether or not they stay home to keep their kids in school and or potentially have to lose their job. Like, all of that has taken a tremendous toll, especially on the mental health that I've seen within our neighborhoods.
Yeah, I think that's right. It's just a very difficult time as we look toward working together to create a city for all, where Black Pittsburgh matters. It's crucial that our approach takes mental health and mental wellness into account, where we acknowledge the trauma and challenges Black Pittsburgh faces in working together to move forward toward a future where we not only achieve justice and equity, but we're able to heal and be whole from the effects of prolonged inequities and injustices. Toward this end, we are honored, very honored today, and proud to be joined by local experts on this subject matter. Nationally known Leon Ford, police violence survivor, activist, writer, change maker, and entrepreneur. Julius Boatwright, founder and CEO of Still Smiling. Tammy Thompson, executive director of Catapult. And Jason Rivers, racial equity consultant and defense outreach specialist. Welcome to today's and this evening's town hall meeting.
Thank you all for being here. So maybe I'll start with Mr. Boatwright and just get a sort of a general take, and then we can go deeper, obviously. But I'm curious to how you view the state of mental health care currently within the Black community within our city.
Yeah, the first thing I'll say is that I think we need to start challenging this narrative that Black people are not seeking ways to heal and that Black people are not taking care of their mental health. We see the opposite of that in our work. Although there's a lot of challenges with the pandemic, with related to COVID, related to added stressors, the Black folks that we're talking to, they want to get therapy. They're actively participating in therapy and providing peer support to their neighbors and their family members. So I just want to be just very clear up front and say that, the way in which we talk about Black mental health and trauma, we just have to start planting those seeds and talking about it from an asset-based place. So that's what I'm saying. I try to approach it from that way and not look at it necessarily from a deficit-based place. And that's what we're hearing.
Thank you. Any others want to chime in? I saw Ms. Thompson, you were nodding.
Yeah, I'm excited, and I'm excited to really be on this panel with these brothers because they've been doing this work and they really understand what our community's needs are as far as mental health is concerned. My specialty really is focusing on poverty. Most of the work that I do is rooted in understanding poverty, but not specifically from a financial space. So we definitely do work that is connected to the financial impact of poverty. But my work, even including my own personal work, is really, really rooted in understanding the emotional and psychological impacts of long-term exposure to poverty. Poverty trauma is something that I think we do not talk about enough. I don't think we are bringing it into spaces where we're talking about programming and talking about the needs of the community. Poverty trauma is at the root of almost every issue that impacts our communities. There is a certain level of PTSD that is associated with not having your most basic needs met on a regular basis. As a person who was born into extremely deep generational poverty, I can tell you that I still suffer the impacts of being hungry, being homeless, witnessing violence, moving from neighborhood to neighborhood because my mother couldn't afford the rent in one neighborhood. And I've lived in virtually every corner of the city. So these things impact us long term. They're impacting our children. They're impacting how we view ourselves, how we view our communities. And so I try to make sure that we are infusing conversations around poverty trauma and ideas around poverty trauma into the work that we do because it is so invasive and pervasive in our communities. And I just don't think that we think about poverty as a traumatic experience the way that we should.
Thanks, Tammy. I love everything that you're doing and have the utmost respect for you. For me, I've been on a therapy for 2 years now, and I see the difference between, where I am now and where I was 2 years. And I call it my mental hygiene. Like for me, going to therapy is as normal as me brushing my teeth every day. My sessions are every Monday at 10 a.m. And it's in my schedule. I never book anything during that time, and I'm always looking forward to that day. And to Brother Julius's point, there's so many, especially young Black folks who hit me up and they not talk about therapy a lot, and they'll hit me up for advice and direction. They want it, and oftentimes they just, don't know how or don't know who to talk to. I'm always sending people Julius, the Still Smiling website, and really engaging them and showing them that this is there's resources out there for us. There are several Black therapists that I know, and let's heal together, and there's people that that go to therapy. They'll hit me up and we'll talk about our sessions. So it's like a community of folks that are engaged, and we would like to invite more people into this lifestyle to show people that you don't have to get shot by a police officer or lose a family member to gun violence to feel like you need to go to therapy. It's normal. Like I encourage people to go, before tragedy strikes. Just to like, now I've been going so long in my sessions, I'm talking about ideas that I may have, and using my therapist as a sounding board to figure out what I want out of life. So I'm not just being impulsive. So I just think that there are huge benefits to normalizing therapy, and viewing it as like hygiene, like going to the gym or brushing your teeth, and so I just I invite everybody to try it out, and if they ever want to talk about it or talk through it, I go and I can give my insights and advice.
I concur with everything that's been said so far. I believe in therapy. I'm in therapy myself. The power of having the opportunity to be vulnerable. That's something that within our community and our spaces for a long time, that vulnerability hasn't always been a cool thing. And at times it's been dangerous, right? So we just have to be realistic that that hasn't always been available to us to experience all of our humanity. And so, I think that allows that opportunity. And another beautiful thing, I think about the our stories, like the power historically of what the non-traditional spots that you would go to within community where therapy takes place, right? It may not always be a licensed person, but which is important to go to one. I'm not denouncing that, but I'm saying, from the pastor, to the religious leader, to the hair salon, the barbershop, like the mentors, just the way that we care for one another. One of my favorite definitions around trauma is multiple negative stressors without the resources to cope. So I think about negative stressors and how many negative stressors that exist within many of the members of our community. And it's one thing to go through adversity, but it's another thing to feel as if I don't have the proper resources to help me navigate and work through those things. So no matter what age you are, just how important it is to be in a space that supports that level of work. And I think also how important it is to center community members as the experts in their own lived experience, right? Because sometimes we find ourselves in situations where, whether it be policymakers or leadership, we tend to, even parents sometimes, but educators, we sometimes make decisions on behalf of people without their input. And I think that that balance between all of us in relationship to when we listen to folks and where they are and what they need, and what they believe a lot of solutions to our own challenges could be, if we're centered in that level of leadership and responsive to that, how much stronger the outcomes could be in relationship to the way that our lives are valued in the city that we live in, and I know the city that we all love and have had different experiences with. So Yeah, it's just an honor to be amongst so much great thinkers, and excited for tonight's conversation.
Leon, I am, I'm really grateful for our friendship. We've been chatting. You said something to me that I really have thought a lot about, and I'd like for you to share a little bit with people who may be listening. You began to talk to me about how this trauma has so much anger attached to it, right? That there are so many people in the community that are just angry. Instead of looking for solutions, they're just negative and angry. But that anger is really not, it's not they're indignant about unrighteousness. Many of it is you're just traumatized, right? And you're coming out of a bad place. And you say this more eloquently than I can, but if you can kind of share a little bit of your thoughts, I think it's just so powerful. It was so powerful to me. I think it'd be powerful for other people to hear.
Absolutely. So I'll just share from my personal, my perspective and lived experience. I remember maybe, 2 years ago now, just being on Twitter, there were things that I would see from, Bill Peduto or, Chief Schubert. And I would call them racist, right? Say they don't care about Black people, and really voice, my opinion on social media. And so I had the opportunity not only to leave Pittsburgh, but also to leave America. I was in Europe for about 7 months, I believe. And during that time, I still went to therapy. When I came back, I stayed in therapy. Then COVID happened. And I remember seeing, the protesters outside of the mayor's house. And I was just like, yo, I had no idea what was going on, because I just, wasn't aware of what was happening with the movement here in Pittsburgh. And there was like so many new faces from when I was, organizing. And so I would ask around to see, like what's happening, And one of the things that, I saw different solutions than they did. And when I would reach out to, some of the organizers, I realized how traumatized they were. And, I felt their pain. I understood the struggle. But me going through therapy for so long helped me to be a little bit more objective in my leadership, which, helped me to see things from a different perspective. And so that kind of, inspired me to talk to different leaders within community. And, from young leaders to the older leaders, when I would, try to get different solutions, I would see, some leaders would, when I would say, yeah, what are some things that you would love to see happen in Black Pittsburgh? What are some solutions? Some leaders, would give me scripture, and I was like, yeah, I'm not asking for scripture, I'm asking for solutions. Or some people would say, well, I don't rock with, this person, or I don't rock with that person, or I don't trust that person. I'm saying, yo, I'm not asking who you don't trust or you don't like, I'm asking you for a solution. And so what I realized is that, there was so much trauma where people couldn't get past the emotionalism of that. Was like, that's really how they felt, and they had a right to feel how they felt. But as leaders in the community, we have to acknowledge what like what we genuinely feel on the inside, and then how we can move forward, right? It's kind of like with me now. I'm not afraid to talk to police officers, right, and leadership. And some of those meetings, I don't always hear what I want to hear. I don't always hear, some officers saying that they want things to change. Like, sometimes I'm dealing with some people's honest perspectives and their blind spots. But the fact that I've been going to therapy and I've done the internal work, I don't have those same triggers. And so when I hear a blind spot, I'm not offended to the point where I want to cut somebody out. It's the opposite. I leverage that moment as a teaching moment where I can completely hear what they're trying to say, and I can, give my perspective in a very innovative and thoughtful way to change their perspective. And even if their perspective doesn't change, right? We live in a community where everybody's not going to believe the same thing. And that's okay with me. I'll just work with somebody else that, you know, see things my way and acknowledge the people who don't.
Yeah, thanks. Others, what is, you know, I think Leon started us off, to kind of talk about your experience. We know that trauma causes these effects. So I guess I want you to share what you see. You know, what are the effects? How are you seeing people behaving and acting out because of their trauma? What are some of those examples?
I have to say, this is one of the reasons why I love Leon Ford. And we don't really know each other. I think we know of each other, but I watched this brother because for years I've been following his story and just watching him, and the beauty of growth. Leon is the beauty of growth. He is the walking epitome of growth, right? What happens when you grow and when you are healing, there's a certain clarity that comes with healing. When you are not getting your basic needs met, when you feel threatened in your own community, when you are afraid, when you are lost, when your soul is literally weighed down with everything that comes with, again, not having your most basic needs met. And that's from material to mental and emotional. There is a darkness that covers you. And that darkness and that unresolved stuff, it, even if people are walking around smiling and we think they're okay, it lives inside of you, and it comes out in your decision making. It comes out in how you're able to have relationships with people. It comes out in how you see yourself and how you see your community and how you see everything, right? It literally is like a cloud that distorts everything. And as you begin to heal, you are able to see things differently. You are able to hear things differently. You are able to plan a path for yourself that moves you further and further away from that trauma and those triggers. Without that, you are literally walking around like a powder keg. There's this powder keg of emotion and fear and all of these things that happen when you're not sure of what's going on around you, but also what's happening inside of your mind and your heart and your soul. So I just love hearing him speak, because I know from experience that journey, that path is so mired with mud and just everything that can possibly weigh you down. And to be able to get to a place where you can see things differently and feel things differently and work towards solutions is one of the biggest gifts you can get. And the gift of healing, but it's so hard to get there because, you know, healing is a path, there's a journey to it, but there's so many obstacles on that journey. Right. Especially for Black folks. I'm just, you know, I'm here talking about Black folks. We're talking about Black Pittsburgh. We got to, you know, Black healing is different because there's so many things that are put before us, that have been put before us in our history that hasn't been resolved. Right. So we're trying to heal our current space and our current condition, but it's really, really hard to do that when we're not seeing a lot of our trauma as Black people in this country be resolved, right? So we, you know, I hear people talking about COVID, and COVID is worse for Black folks. And of course it is, because all of the issues that we're facing, these are things that we've been facing before anybody knew what COVID was. There's a compounded trauma that happens to us. There's a compounded trauma after trauma after trauma after trauma, right? So every time we think we moved a little bit further in this direction, here's something else that's happening. We don't get time to catch our breath. We don't get time to heal from the last thing that happened to us. And, you know, 2020 was a great evidence of that. There was so much that was happening to the Black community last year that I think that definitely impacted and compounded a lot of the stress and a lot of the trauma that folks were, because we haven't had a chance to heal from one thing before something else happens. And it's been that way for 400 years. We are talking about compounded, unresolved trauma. And so, yes, people get angry because we're like, we don't see this getting fixed before the next thing is in front of us to try to fix. And it's even worse for, people who don't have a voice, right? People don't feel like they have a voice. And so, we could go on and on about that forever, but I just feel like compounded trauma is our biggest challenge, right? We don't really get a chance to catch our breath before the next thing is put before us.
Julius and Jason, what do you see out there in dealing with people? What is the reaction? Which we know trauma's there. How's the behavior? What do you see? Julius?
So just listening to Leon and everybody, Tammy and Jason talk, I'm already feeling some healing happening, with myself internally. So I want to really highlight that point, because when we talk about trauma-informed care, it starts with individuals, right? So we oftentimes think of what's the trauma-informed framework, what's the modality, what are the steps. If we don't have people who are willing to acknowledge what Tammy's talking about and say, you know what, there's so much compounding and complex trauma with all of us, particularly Black folks. And if we're not extending that grace and that space to each other to say, okay, you know what, I know things are dire right now, and we're at this table, we're trying to come up with this solution, but I need to be able to approach you in a way that gives you so much grace, gives you endless grace, right? Not the removal of accountability, but just gives you that grace while still holding each other accountable. That's something that I think there's a big opportunity for us, particularly as Black folks at a local level, because I don't know if this is the way that y'all view it, but this is how I perceived it when COVID happened. The pandemic hit and everything just kept moving 100 miles an hour. The speed of life maybe even picked up when COVID happened. There was no, all right, let's pause for a minute. Let's give people a chance to grieve. Like Tammy said, we haven't even had a chance to grieve all of the loss in the pandemic, let alone all of the generational loss that has compounded and we're still not able to process in the pandemic. So I'm just giving that context to say, when we think about trauma-informed care within the Black community, we have to ask ourselves, like, how am I giving people grace? How am I giving myself grace? How am I showing up in a way that's not combative, that's not defensive, that's not putting more pressure on people when they need grace and space to process? Because all of us are dealing with something, especially at this particular point.
Jason?
Yeah, again, I agree. I think to your question around, what we're seeing, what I'm observing, is along those lines. I'm looking at a city that I love, community members that I love, many that I know. I was directly impacted by COVID. I was like number 7 in regards to Allegheny County for individuals that had it, and I had it pretty bad, significantly. I had pneumonia in both lungs. Like I was pretty close to, what that could look like. So I'm grateful to be here, and I know it was the love, support, and care that I was able to receive. Again, the research talks about, the number of caring individuals or adults that can be around a person has a lot to do with, decisions that they make, how they process through what they're dealing with. And so, I think that's super critical. Back to that point around, I'm looking at community members that are afraid, that are hurt, and those aren't acceptable emotions to express externally. Like the one posture that is acceptable for especially Black men, but to showcase is one around anger and aggression. But we understand that that's secondary to what pain and hurt really looks like, right? And so to be able to be in a space where you can talk with somebody about it and you can relate. To Julius's point around even being able to do what we're doing right now, there's a level of that's really therapeutic about this. Like Leon and I, we oftentimes, just have late conversations where what's beautiful about with Leon is that I find he contributes to my healing way more than I think that I contribute to his, right? And I think the beauty of when we can move with our authentic selves beyond ego is that it transcends. What can we learn from the younger generation? And what can the younger generation learn from the elders, right? And what are the external things that are violent to us on a daily basis that we feel under attack about? And then what's the internal things within our community where we're causing harm to each other? Because both need to be addressed. And what does healing look like on that process? And so to the point where like you said, we've already had challenges. We've already had stressors, folks that were struggling to cope and deal. And then when you add something like COVID, where it totally shifts the way that we have to navigate and move, and you need resources to be successful in this new way of operating, it can be another stressor added to people. And but what I'll say is that the beauty of the Black community and the Black experience. So they talk about two things, right, in epigenetics. So two things that are passed on from one generation to the other is trauma can be passed on, right, which we need that healing around, but also resilience. And so there's so many examples within our community historically here in Pittsburgh that we can lean on, that the resilience of the generations that have come before us. When I listen and talk to the young people now, like there's so much to gather and gain in ways that they're finding outlets on their own that we aren't always familiar with, the way they're using social media to connect and support one another. So yes, we do have very serious things that need to be addressed, but we also have a story that should really be unearthed in regards to on a daily basis, like community members that may not have the resources or know who to go to for some of the levels of therapy and counseling that we're talking about, but grandmas that are taking care of, not only their children, but the neighbor and so on and so forth. Like the block that I live on is so beautiful here in Larmer. And I'm glad Leon, invited me into the neighborhood, but like, it's just rich with individuals that care about it. It's opposite of what we would believe about our own self. And I think that's what's really important. And somebody said that earlier on, like what narrative, who is controlling our narrative, right? Because we should be the ones to talk about the good, bad, and indifferent. And I just see examples of within our community, like always, where in spite of what we're dealing with, folks are finding a way to make a way. And we also need some very real supports in regards to, these issues that are occurring for our community members. So to me, it's not an either or, it's like a both and.
So talk to us a little bit about how one goes about getting the appropriate mental health support. It sounds as if all of us in some form or capacity could probably utilize it. But if you all would just maybe share with us a little bit about how someone could go about getting mental health support. Also, if there's any telltale signs that one may need or could be benefit from mental health support.
Go ahead, Julius. So we're just real easy. Folks can contact Still Smiling, 412-532-9458. That's a text or a call number, or they can email us, info at stillsmilingpgh.org. And we will help folks navigate that process. So I want to say something about getting connected to a mental health professional, particularly when you're a Black person. The process can be very daunting because it is daunting, right? Even for me as a licensed social worker, as somebody who's been in the field, every day I have to make sure I maintain my relationships with this provider or this clinician because people are constantly moving around. They're changing policies, insurances are changing. So imagine being somebody for the first time and you want to get connected to mental health support, and all these different moving pieces are getting in your way. So we try to like stretch that process out for people, because what traditionally happens is it's like, okay, you want a therapist, we're going to refer you to one. You may or may not get a chance to vet that therapist and really make a determination for yourself if you even want them to be your therapist. So we try to stretch that out and say, okay, therapist, we're going to need you to give this community member an opportunity to get to know you, right? If with any kind of relationship, you got to have trust, you got to get to know somebody before, especially before you start telling them all of your life's trauma and your pain and all that, and start reliving that stuff. You got to have a relationship and a bond with people before you do that. So we're very intentional about letting therapists know, hey, whenever we make a referral to you, we don't want you to just dive right into that first session. We want you, I don't care if we need to pay $100, $200 extra for that person to get a vetting session with you. Give them that space and that time to see if they connect with you, and then they can make a determination. Like Jason said, trusting the people in the community and their lived experiences and giving them the power to make that determination, as opposed to people within the system making that decision for them. So we're always doing our best to try to give that power back to the people to make those choices for themselves. And I will also add too, in terms of getting connected to a resource, if you get connected to a therapist and it doesn't work with the first one, that's okay. You know, I've gone through 5, 6 therapists over the course of my lifetime. Some of them I had really, really impactful and meaningful relationships with. Others I didn't. But sometimes it can be so scary that we think, okay, if I try with one and I didn't have the right kind of connection with them, then I'm just not going to try again. You know, it was much of the same. So educating our folks to know, like, okay, you may have a negative experience at some point in time, and that's okay. It's like shopping around for something, right? You're not going to buy the very first car or the very first shirt or whatever it is. Like, you're going to look at it, you're going to try it on, you're going to test drive it if it's a car. Like, have that same philosophy and approach when you're looking for a therapist. You can get to know them, and if it doesn't work, you have that right as a client to say, you know what, this isn't working. I want to find a new therapist. I guess the third piece I would say is that just the acknowledgement that it's okay to reach out for help. I think, like Brother Jason said, like we, some Black people are still in this mindset of, if I ask for help, it's going to be a sign of weakness. It's going to show that, you know, I don't have control over my emotions, over my life, whatever the case may be. But just getting to that point where you're like, you know what, I'm going to be open, I'm going to be transparent, and I'm going to ask for help. I think that's the most courageous thing in my mind that anybody could do, is ask for help.
Yeah, I love everything Julius just said, and I concur. One thing I want to add is cultural competency in therapy is extremely important. Pittsburgh has a very small community of Black therapists, way too small. We need way more, because our folks are really starting to recognize the value in mental health services. And I see a post on Facebook at least once a week where somebody is saying, I want a Black therapist. Please, refer a Black therapist. And I see folks, and every time somebody makes that post, I pull a notebook and a pen out and start writing, because it's a small number. We have a very small number here. And Blackness is unique. There's a uniqueness in being Black that I think is very important for the folks who are serving our folks from a mental health standpoint, understand that perspective. I wish I had stumbled upon therapy much earlier in my life. I found it a lot later. And like Julia said, I went through several therapists. But there are some amazing therapists in this city, but they can't see everybody, right? Because there's just so many. There's so many people who need it, and they are working hard. Shout out to Erica Givner and Jessica Gurley, all the folks who are just out here crushing it in the mental health space, and who are doing it from such a space of love and understanding and compassion from from an understanding of the Black experience. I also want to encourage folks who are, Black folks who are benefiting, who are seeking therapy and who are benefiting from it. Share your stories, right? This is not anything to be embarrassed or ashamed about. We have to talk about our experiences, and I get a lot of heat, believe it or not, from people who tell me that I am too transparent, that I talk about my experiences too much. It's not professional, and I think that's a bunch of nonsense. I am here to share my experiences for one purpose and one purpose only, and that is to encourage other people who are going through the things that I've gone through to look at life differently, to look at a different perspective, to listen to my story in hopes that they're going to hear something that inspires and motivates them to feel better and heal. That's it. So I'm an open book. I tell people all the time, I have nothing to hide. I'm an open book, but I really want people to think differently about this mental health thing. It is, for one, it's important for our own personal healing, our own state of mind, but it's also important for wealth building. It's important for, being a voice in your community and changing the things that you don't like in your community. You can't help other people if you aren't healed yourself. You can't see the bigger picture when you are weighed down with trauma that isn't getting resolved. Healing is an open door to the next phase of your life. And I strongly believe none of us have to end up where we started, right? But the path to that change is really, really, from my perspective, rooted in our emotional and psychological healing.
There's a little boy that I was chatting with, and he was having a problem hitting other kids in the classroom, in the neighborhood. He was just having this problem, and I even saw him act out. And he's a little boy, 6, 7, 8, and he got angry. He started hyperventilating. He started getting like angry, like an Incredible Hulk, and I'm like, this is really intense for a little kid. And after a while, I found out that that's because he was being beaten at home by his mom. She was beating him like a man, and then because he was receiving this trauma at home, he was acting out and inflicting this hurt on other people because he was hurt. And I guess, and I'd like for you to kind of start talking about that, Leon. That's what I see. I see, and I don't know if you see that in the Black community. I see hurt people hurt and then hurting other people rather than healing other people. They're so hurt, they act out and hurt other people.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, people project, right? They project their fears, their abandonment, the rejection, the sadness, the frustration onto other people. There's also a concept called transference, right? Where you kind of transfer whatever you may be feeling onto somebody else. And unfortunately, we didn't learn in school how to cope, right? We don't learn in school how to deal with our emotions. And, if people aren't, receiving that love and support at home, then, it's a trigger effect where it continues to get worse. And, unfortunately, that goes into communities. I mean, Brother Jay and I, we've had conversations with people, a friend who's incarcerated, and he shared his lived experience, and how his lived experience played out into the decision that he made. And so it's important for us. This is why it's important for us to have these conversations, right? To show people what healing looks like and to help them, think about that process and that journey. One thing that I really think about a lot is social media. A lot of people, they're so fast to go on the social media to say how they feel because they feel like they don't have a voice, in community or in their families. And so Facebook or Instagram or Twitter becomes their voice, which has, it can be positive, right? It can have like a positive impact, but it also can have a negative impact, and so I encourage people to be very mindful and thoughtful about what they share on social media, because there's some things, especially like with community leadership, right? There's some things where Pittsburgh is so small, especially Black Pittsburgh. We are all 1 degree of separation away from somebody. I don't care if you're from the north, south, east, or west. You can get somebody's phone number and call them. And also there's somebody in the middle who parties respect equally, that can help facilitate, a conversation. And so I find it very disheartening when I see leaders of different systems that can work together coming at each other on social media. Like for instance, Rev, like I reached out to you because of healing, right? It took me going to therapy, right? And me finding my voice as a man to say, yeah, it doesn't matter what I hear about Rev in the community. Let me talk to him as a man. And when I called you and we sat down, you told me your story. You told me different things about you that I've never heard, and I told you different things about me. And we were able to sit together and build a friendship, right? And so regardless of like what happens on social media and different people's views, there's going to be times where we don't agree, right? And that is okay. That doesn't mean we got to rip each other's heads off, right? Because this is what true community building is about. Sometimes I got to check my ego. I might feel some type of way, and I'll sit on it instead of just going on social media and trying to rip somebody that looked like me, rip their heads off. And, a lot of times people think they know somebody's full story, right? Some people think they know my full story. There's things about me that people just don't know, right? There's certain triggers and blind spots that I have that people aren't aware of. I did a partnership with Yahoo, and during that talk, there was a lot of talk, from people from the LGBTQ community, and I had to let them know, like, yo, I have blind spots, so there's certain things that y'all got to teach me. You know what I'm saying? Like, I didn't remember pronouns from school, so when I jump on a call and everybody's like, yo, what's your pronoun? And I'm like, I write. I'm a writer. I'm like, yo, what is a pronoun? Right? Like, I don't know what to say. That doesn't make me a homophobe because I don't acknowledge your pronoun. I just don't know, right? And so there can be an assumption that I know these things where, then people can judge me based off of how I respond. And then that's how, we create these larger divides, right? And as leaders, if you influence a bunch of people, right? And one of the reasons, like, I'll talk to police, leadership within police, leadership from the mayor's office. I have friends who are Jewish and Muslims and Quakers. I'm about building community. And so even if somebody has a different perspective than me, if I know that, I'm leading a bunch of people and they're leading a bunch of people and we want to build, a stronger sense of community, I'm going to have a conversation with you. If you watch old movies about, different, like Troy, the kings are talking to each other, right? And then you might have their armies going at it, but the kings are going to come together and they're going to say, yo, what's the best thing for our dynasty? What are we trying to build? And, as kings and queens of our communities, all the petty, talk and conversations, like, and the gossip, I try not to get involved in that. What is the solution and how can we move forward to solutions? Even if, we ain't on the same side and whatever the political thing is going on, that's cool. Like for the people who's in politics. But at the end of the day, we need results. And to get results, we got to have relationships with everybody. That's just my philosophy.
See, again, another reason why I love him so much. Gentlemen, I am so sorry. I do have to jump off because I have to get on another panel at 7. But this
Yeah.
was amazing conversation. Thank you so much for inviting me. You guys are in great hands with these gentlemen, and I hope that I can do it with them again soon. Thank you for inviting me. It was amazing.
So Miss Thompson,
Yes.
give us 1 minute before you jump off
Okay.
because you run a phenomenal organization, Circles,
It's
that is
now
doing something
catapult. Now, now.
and catapult, and you're coming to the hill.
Yeah.
I'm so blessed to have you coming to the neighborhood.
Thank you.
But Circles specifically, and even with through Catapult, is designed to help families navigate their way out of poverty. So
Mhm.
if you could give us a 1 minute overview of how a family who's interested in your organization can get engaged, please do so.
Absolutely. So, first of all, we were formerly known as Circles Greater Pittsburgh, and now we are officially known as Catapult Greater Pittsburgh. And Catapult Greater Pittsburgh is an organization that has an extremely heavy focus on anti poverty and economic justice, primarily for Black folks in this city. We recognize that. The inability or loss of opportunity to create assets over past generations is still impacting our families. So we are extremely focused on one, helping people while they are in crisis mode, right? So addressing people's needs while they're in crises so that as those crises are resolved, they can open their mind and clear their mind and have an emotional and mental bandwidth to focus on wealth building initiatives such as home ownership and entrepreneurship. So we want all of our folks to feel comfortable coming to us no matter what their current condition is, no matter where they are. We believe that every single person has the ability to move themselves into the next phase of their life. And we want to be there to support them in that. So the best way for folks to contact us is to check out our website at www.catapultpittsburgh.org, or they can reach us by telephone at 412-623-9596, or follow us on social media at Catapult Pittsburgh.
Thank you very much, and
Thank
thank you for
you.
being with us this evening.
Thank you so much, guys. Take care of yourselves. I love you guys.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.
At this point, Micah Smith has been monitoring the online questions, and so I want to bring her on. But as she gets ready to ask some of the questions that have been online, I do have two other quick questions. One, I was hoping, Jason, you would also do the same and talk about Tandem ED, how youth can get involved with it. Because again, all of you all are doing phenomenal work, but again, these are resources for our community. So for those who are not aware, if you would share some information. And then maybe, Julius, if you would also just maybe briefly talk about children and how we can get children engaged in mental health support as well. I mentioned it sort of at the beginning. I've seen an uptick in children having mental health related hospitalizations. And I think while many of these children are stuck at home and not amongst their normal networks, they're also suffering. And so if you would also share maybe one or two ways we could help with our youth, that would also be helpful.
Cool. And if I could yield a little portion of my time, I think to your question, Brother Lavelle, Leon, there was an exercise we did around mindfulness, meditation, a night when his son was really upset about something. And it just was a powerful experience that I think like anybody, no matter where you are and what you're dealing with, to do what I was able to engage with him and his son. And to your point about children, I think it just be powerful, Leon, if you could share that story with the group. I know it impacted me just watching you and him do it together. And in regards to Tandem Ed, it's a national organization that so the agenda of Tandem Ed is to walk alongside Black communities across the country and using the power of media to tell our stories. And so we launch media campaigns. We piloted the program here in Pittsburgh about 6 years ago. And every city starts out with a concept called Own Your Story. And that's where we learn the power of media, the power of research and telling our own stories and narrative building. And we were able to create a campaign that was titled Black is Pittsburgh. And it was really under the concept that, there is quality of life for Black people in Pittsburgh. There is a richness to our communities. And, the way that we're oftentimes perceived in the media, is around negative perception, criminality or athletics. But there's Black is not a monolith, and we're not only one or two different things, but there's multiple modalities to who we are, and our children and our community members need and have the right to experience all of what they desire to experience in life. And I think that's another stressor for us, like feeling that we need to fit into somebody's box. And so, we did it here in Pittsburgh. We're now working in New Orleans, Detroit, Newark, New Jersey, and we've just launched some work in Jackson, Mississippi. So that's something that folks can get involved in. Tandemed.com is the website. So encourage folks to engage there. We're actually going to be relaunching here in Pittsburgh again, circling back as the founding city of the work. And it's powerful to connect our communities across the country, where we can build and talk about our lived experiences. What is similar? What are different? How do we support and rally and build with one another intentionally and unapologetically? And the belief that we are the leaders and protectors of our own spaces is a really powerful thing to stand on. And that's where we stand. And the last thing that I'll say is, AR3 is a basketball league that I've been running with my family here in the East End for, for like the last 8 years. But it's an opportunity for, the emergence of athletics and healing around violence. Unfortunately, I lost a brother to gun violence. And so it's a way for community to come together and have conversations about trauma, everything we've been talking about today around the sport that we know people are attracted to. And the last thing that I'll say, so every summer we've had the opportunity to do this league at the, Penley basketball court in East Liberty, the old Connie Hawkins, legendary Connie Hawkins, which many know by. And, so the court is just refurbished again. Community comes together to participate. But like I said, it's all around healing, forgiveness, atonement. And a really powerful thing is that one of the individuals that plays in the league, he's a younger brother of the individual that was involved in the situation that took my brother's life. So, we talk about the degrees of separation, but with the power, healing is a everyday choice. There's some days I get up and I don't feel like healing. Like, I don't feel like that conversation about forgiveness. My mind's somewhere else. But, then I have tools to ground myself and center myself. So, that's just the last thing that I wanted to say. But just grateful to be a part of this and look forward to more conversations.
Thank you. Brother Ford, you want to share?
Yeah, absolutely. Now I'm a certified guided meditation instructor, and I meditate with my son. And so I think it was in the summertime, we had like a movie in the yard, movie night, and my son was upset at one of my cousins who hit him. And I let him cry, I let him go through his emotions. But then I was like, yo, let's meditate. And we sat down in the front yard. It was like midnight, and Brother Jason was cleaning up the yard from all the kids and stuff. And I invited him to sit down with us. And I had my little cousin with me who was 7 at the time. My son was 7 as well. And we meditated for about 15 minutes, and it completely calmed him down. He actually fell asleep, right? I believe he fell asleep on my, but, as a community, sometimes we just need to breathe, that anger and sadness, frustration, like it's normal, right? And I just find the value in breathing. And so when my son is upset, I'll put my hand on his back or on his shoulder and say, come on, breathe with me. And we'll take like 10 deep breaths. and he'll be calm, and so to that point of, Black therapist and healing, I am a certified guided meditation instructor, and I'm in school right now for psychology at Duquesne, and so that's going to be my path. I want to really help community heal in that way.
Nice, thank you. Micah, do you want to go through some of the questions online?
Yes, so we've had some great engagement, and I think one of the important bits was talking about the social determinants of mental health in Black communities, sort of community specific problems. And someone mentioned that the president of the workforce development system will be transitioning to a new role. And they wanted to spark conversation about the issues and solutions to help Black people gain employment, unemployment, and not being able to take care of your families, poverty, the social determinants is a big part of mental health that social workers and therapists can't tackle. So sort of how do we, how do we tackle this from that end as well?
That's a great question. Thank you to whoever posed that. So I'm really fascinated by looking at the intersection of Black mental health and workforce development. So sometimes we look at it as like two separate things, and I think we have to look at it as an intersection, right? So meaning, how do we connect with Black people in our communities who are in need of mental health support to, one, equip them with the tools and the knowledge to take care of themselves, and also to use those tools and knowledge to support other people within their communities, right? So we're not just saying we recognize that you need mental health support, so we're going to connect you to a service, but we're also saying we're going to do that and provide an employment opportunity for you to continue providing healing to yourself and to other people within your community, in your own neighborhood. So basically paying people to heal themselves and then investing in them to help other people heal. So that's this whole idea of peer support, utilizing people's lived experiences to the best of their ability, and not always thinking that we have to rely on traditional systems of delivering mental health care, but the healthcare is within our communities. We just have to make the investment into people to change their emotional and economic situation.
So I don't really have an answer to this question. However, I've been like looking around the country for some best practices to bring to Pittsburgh. I'm working on a few things here that I really can't, share right now. But if anybody has ideas and or different solutions, like let's talk about it.
One of the things, and I'll just chime in. This is something I talk a lot about with the Black elected officials. That what I've learned in doing this work is that everybody's right. Whatever they say is wrong in the Black community needs to be solved. They're right. If you say it's education, you're right. If you say it's housing, you're right. If it's police violence, you're right. If it's unemployment, you're right. If it's drug addiction, you're right. What they're wrong about is that no one thing by itself is going to change the community. It's going to take us taking a concerted, concentrated, coordinated effort to take all of these issues and try to solve them all at once, right? And do it at scale. And so like place like Larmer, that means building 400 new houses, at the same time giving the kids extra tutoring programs, at the same time giving the parents workforce development, at the same time putting them close to transportation, at the same time giving them after school programming and Saturday program, at the same time of giving them counseling and therapeutic counseling, at the same time providing them social recreational needs. And we have to consciously give families all the things they need at the same time, because that's what I think is the ultimate solution, is to do it in tandem with other interventions.
Thank you. Micah?
Yes. Sorry, I'm scrolling through. We have a lot of great engagement today. something else that has been spoken about here, and that I know Mr. Boatwright is passionate about, is how we sort of come out of our silos and leverage our collective efforts and experience to have a cohesive movement for advancing Black people and mental health in Pittsburgh. How we sort of bond together and come together to do that. That there's some separate works going on, but how do we really unite these to empower ourselves here in Black Pittsburgh?
I'll go. This is why I always encourage people to heal, because the problem that we have in Black Pittsburgh is, and Pittsburgh in general, is there's a lot of distrust, and until, people heal within themselves, then it's going to be hard, to have this strong collective, group of people working on, similar issues, because, you might have, a few leaders here and somebody over here, but there's always that friction. And so I think, it's important, for people to, commit to healing individually and collectively. And as we do that, we can have real conversations about, our triggers, our pain points, different things that we've been through. Because I mean, people like I said, when I met with different leaders and they would tell me, well, I can't trust this person, or I don't like that person. They had real, experiences, right? That I couldn't, dismiss. And so it's up to, those leaders to really to heal, because, until we heal, we won't be able to have those conversations. And an example of that is, again, me and Rev being able to talk. There was a time where I felt a way, toward him, and I would never reach out, right? And, for me going to therapy, I made a decision to say, yo, like, let me reach out, let me get to know his story. Let me get to know, what he's doing, and how can I help him, lead in the community, instead of, just, gossiping and going on, social media and tearing them apart. And that's what we do. There's so many people, and this happens in other cities as well, when, we feel away, we go directly to social media. And so I challenge people, like, if you feel some type of way, you could still express how you feel to that person, especially if there's somebody that you mutually respect, that is present. That's what we need, and that's what elders are for. We need that, from a political standpoint. We need it from a street standpoint. There's been times where I've been in the middle, like with Brother Jay, of families who somebody lost a loved one and somebody has a loved one in prison, and I'm in the middle, and I have to speak my truth. And that's a very hard position to be in. But because I'm committed to healing, and I'm committed to being authentic and sharing my truth, I manage to navigate those spaces in truth. I don't go to one family with a truth and go to another family with a different truth. And so we just have to be committed to the work, committed to being authentic, and committed to, conflict resolution, be it some street stuff. Like I'm mediating right now with two of my homies who are going at it, and, I'm just trying to make it right. And so, or it could be more political or nonprofit. We just need to, we need people who are good at conflict resolution. Maybe that's something, Brother Julius, maybe that's something we could work on together. And Brother Jay, just people who are committed to building bridges, and to see both, different groups' perspectives, and say, yo, okay, I understand that, but how could we work together? And that's what it's going to take. Is we got to acknowledge, some pain points. We got to acknowledge, some different things, and then get past it. Like Rav, it wasn't just all sweet. Rav acknowledged some things where he was like, yo, like, this is what you did and this is how I felt, you know, and I sat there and I listened to them. You know what I mean? And that is important as we're building community, you know, and a stronger sense of community here in Pittsburgh.
Just really quick, Leon, you were kind enough to drop your self-care guide in the comments, but can you talk a little bit about the process of doing that work and what to expect for someone looking at it for the first time?
Absolutely. Thank you for that. So the self-care guide was inspired by a friend who, like, I had several friends who would ask me, like, yo, like, how do you continue to smile after everything you've been through? And I would always say self-care. And then I had a few friends that challenged me on that said, like, yo, what exactly is self-care? Like, what does that look like for you? And so my good friend Michael Farber, he reached out to some folks, and we collaborated, and they helped me, you know, they listened to me talk, and I brain dumped to them, and they helped me create this handbook, which is literally like how I learned to take care of myself, from reading and writing to meditating and even drinking water and exercising, right? So it's just a comprehensive plan for people to take care of themselves.
That's great, thank you. And so I think I've pinned it. So anyone looking for his guide, it's top comment now. Thank
you very much. It is about 13:14 after. We did promise to keep you all for 1 hour. We're grateful that you all were willing to spend a little more with us. I would hopefully ask that you all be willing to come back and have another conversation with us. I know for myself, there were a lot of conversations and questions that I simply did not get to because you all were very eloquent in your responses and very informative. So you all have an open invitation to please join us for another episode. But with that being said, we have reached our time for today's show. And I do want to sincerely thank our guests, starting with Mr. Leon Ford, an activist, a writer, a change maker, and an entrepreneur, and just an overall wonderful person. The same can be said for Mr. Julius Boatwright, founder and CEO of Still Smiling, as well as Tammy Thompson, the executive director of Catapult, and Mr. Jason Rivers, racial equity consultant and defense outreach specialist. It truly takes relationships, as Mr. Ford has stressed to us, and coalitions of individuals such as you all who are willing to come together, put differences aside, and focus on rebuilding our community. And in doing so, we will absolutely build a better Black community for all of us, and we'll do so with our partners and allies, all of which I consider you all to be. So thank you.
I want to thank all of you for watching and participating in this town hall meeting. Remember, you can watch this show on Facebook, the city's YouTube channel, or the city's cable channel. A new meeting occurs every Wednesday. By working together, united in purpose, we can transform our city, strengthen it for all of its residents. Pittsburgh can only be a city for all when it becomes a city where Black Pittsburgh matters. Good evening, stay safe, and be blessed.